Angel, what is Tucker Carlson's agenda? Did you see his quote-unquote conversation with Jank? Why did Tucker seem sensible? Well, because Tucker's really good at what he does. And I think that people need to actually start, like, we need to assess. I mean, well, I'll keep doing the, like, why can't you say that anymore? Because, part of this show is entertainment and mockery and everything. But Tucker Carlson is extremely good at what he does, and he is very adept at doing the twists that we're talking about, actually, of taking at times legitimate grievances and twisting them towards fascistic ends. Fascifying. Yeah. That's a good phrase. Fascifying them. Or also doing what Trump did. Which, Mehdi Hassan was the first person to point this out. Some people on the left found it refreshing that Donald Trump responded to sanctimonious TV interviewers asking him about Russian human rights records by saying, like, you think we're such angels? And some people were kind of like, yeah, that's kind of refreshing, because every day some politician is extolling the endless virtues of a country that for 90% of its history, I believe the number is 90% of its history, has been in some form of war or another, that presides over a global empire that, we know all of this stuff. And this isn't just like a moral accounting. It's in our DNA and strategy as a country, from the genocide of the Native Americans to global kinetic warfare now, from Somalia to Yemen to Pakistan. So he is able to, but as Mehdi Hassan said, Noam Chomsky points that out, because the point is that we shouldn't be doing any of that, whether it's us or Assad or Russia or Iran or China or whoever. We need to create a better global system that does not treat so many lives as expendable. Tucker Carlson is he is a master of using those correct hypocrisies and pieties, but not to devolve the discourse. And you're seeing a lot of this with the Jamal Khashoggi story, right? So look.
Yeah, we saw it around Me Too, right? Too, like, oh, this happens all the time, therefore it's fine, versus this happens all the time, therefore we need to do something about it.
Right, therefore we need to uproot it.
That's why hypocrisy arguments are insufficient.
Exactly. So we saw with Jamal Khashoggi, which Tucker's going to talk about in this case. So obviously, he talks about the examples you just brought up plenty, and uses those as well. Jamal Khashoggi was, yes, Lindsey Graham, who is a self-proclaimed regular defender of the Saudis, had a big meltdown about what happened with Jamal Khashoggi. Of course, and you're going to see this in the clip, the Saudis are engaged in a campaign of mass murder in Yemen. And while I do not buy the stupid line on the other side of this equation, the Saudis undoubtedly support Salafist groups in Syria. And they have their own profoundly repressive and cruel record inside the kingdom. And why is that, like, what leaps out about this thing? Well, actually, one thing that does leap out about this thing is that this still is a level of brazenness that shows, again, a devolution of basic standards. And that actually does matter. But more broadly, we should be using this as an example to evolve another system. But watch how Tucker Carlson uses this. It's really effective, and people got to be watching this guy.
So there you have it. Khashoggi is in fact dead, as we have already been told, and the Saudis did it. They admit it now. What should we make of this? Well, the usual head nodders on TV seem stunned by the news. They can hardly believe that a bloodthirsty medieval theocracy would do something like this. Really? The Saudis? The same people who cut off the hands of thieves and behead adulterers in public parks? The same regime that is currently prosecuting one of the world's cruelest wars in one of the world's poorest countries, Yemen. You're telling me these people murdered a political opponent? Doesn't sound like the Saudis we know. Come on. Of course they did it. We knew they did it. Their only concern was getting caught. Now they have been caught, and they probably regret the whole thing. All of that makes sense. None of it is surprising. What is confusing is the wave of false posturing on display from our own mindless ruling class. Khashoggi's death, they're telling us, is now somehow the most important story in the world. Far more important than the many political murders China commits each year, far more than Saudi Arabia, or the countless children the Saudis have bombed and starved to death in Yemen. More than that, they're telling us it's a moral litmus test, the latest in a long series of moral litmus tests that are delivered to us by Fiat on cable news. Support this, don't support that, otherwise you're a bad person. That's the message of almost every show. Share my beliefs or you are damned. Now, in this case, it's a little confusing because keep in mind, these are the same people, the ones commanding you to hate the Saudis, who just months ago were uncritically repeating Saudi talking points right from the embassy. Remember when we bombed Syria last spring and bombed it the year before? Well, the Saudis pushed that. Everyone knew that. It might have been nice to hear that on television. We could have used some media skepticism at the time, but no. Only this show pretty much brought that up. The rest of the press loved it. They love all wars. The more distant and the more pointless, the better. Okay, but spare us the theatrics now.
So he's right about a lot of things in that. I agree with probably 90% of what he's saying. And the ends to which he's using it are, this is another reason to hate liberals. This is an internal conversation in the United States, and the conclusion should be to roll your eyes at anybody who expresses any commitment to humanitarian concerns. You see how he flips that? If he said, these people are full of shit, they're concerned about this horrific incident, but they have nothing to say about the structure of U.S.-Saudi relations, which are the way they are because of oil companies, because of the way we've designed our economy. They have nothing to say about, well, he didn't actually say it's not just the Saudi war in Yemen, it's our war in Yemen. And if you want, and in fact, they are right in a limited sense that having an ally have a U.S. resident go into an embassy and murder him there, that's actually pretty unusual. And that is the type of thing that if it goes unchecked means that the next range of things that were unacceptable escalate. And that is actually where, I'm sorry to say, liberals are right. That actually leads to the type of thing where maybe the Chinese do start doing that type of thing. Maybe it leads back to like in the 70s when the Chilean dissident was blown up in D.C. with Kissinger's knowledge, as far as I understand. Maybe that becomes more of a regular thing. So that's why it matters in and of itself. But the point is that he'll take a lot of points that are absolutely correct, but he will zero in on a generalized hate of elites and delegitimize the whole thing, which is, hey, you know what? Let's do something about Yemen. Let's do something about Saudi relationships. And by the way, if you want to do something about Saudi relationships, the other thing that's a major factor here is the amount of Saudi money parked in New York real estate and in Silicon Valley, and probably Elon Musk's company pretty soon as well. And that's when you get to the real structure of hypocrisy and elites and capitalism, which is that when money's at stake, nobody gives a fuck. And that is something that Tucker Carlson will not have much to say about because he doesn't have a redistributive agenda. He has a exploit your grievances agenda.
Yeah, and he's only talking about this now because it's useful to fascism, right?
That's right.
Like I was looking for previous times he's talked about Yemen, and it's only ever in the context to defend defend Assad, basically, right?
Right. I'll use it to defend another fascist.
Yeah.
Not to say that what's happening in Yemen and Syria, which implicates, if you include those countries, basically every major regional and every major global power in crimes against humanity.
Yeah. This is why leftists are more effective at countering the far right a lot of the time. Because, yes, we can agree about liberal hypocrisy, and we can agree about some of his analysis of political economy was correct. It was stuff that I think is true when he was arguing with Cenk. And Cenk did not have a critique of capitalism in the other direction. So it was kind of hard for him to counter that. I don't believe for a second that Tucker Carlson actually cares about the average American worker. But he was right when he brought up the fact that bosses can use undocumented workers to break unions and drive down wages. Now, his conclusion from that is that we need to have this genocidal degree of enforcement at the border and basically keep them out. But no, like the leftist conclusion from that is we need to incorporate these workers into an organized internationalist labor movement, as we have done. I mean, not me, but as organizers have done with success throughout American history. Like Cesar Chavez was not right about this. And that was another fact he brought up that was correct. Labor organizer Cesar Chavez was very opposed to illegal immigration and in some cases even legal immigration. And it wasn't on the grounds of racism because Cesar Chavez was Mexican American. It was on the grounds that it would weaken unions. But then other organizers were like, no, wait, we're all workers. It's the brotherhood of man. We're going to bring these folks into our movement. And in the end, that strengthened the labor movement. So these are things that I want people to have a grasp of when they're dealing with these slippery right-wing ghouls.
Definitely. Let's run through more of these clips. This is with regards to Jamal Khashoggi, because I do want to sort of keep running through this story. The new information that's been released, President Erdogan is promising that within 48 hours he's going to release all information which they've been dripping out gradually to sort of perfectly pin the Saudis over the last week or almost 2 weeks at this point. The most bizarre thing now is actually the footage of a body double. Apparently one of the members of this hit squad walked out with fake facial hair and Jamal Khashoggi's clothes and walked around Istanbul going to different tourism sites. And the Saudis' evolving reasons, it went from first he was accidentally killed, and now it's apparently as if that there was just this team that hit him in an embassy, but of course with no senior oversight or approval, which just defies imagination. This is an Al Jazeera clip. It begins with a clip with the Saudi foreign minister whose first interview was granted to Fox News, which is interesting.
Weird.
In regards to this conversation. I wonder why that might be. And then there's a little bit of context around it in terms of some of the reporting we have on this.
Of the operation.
There weren't people closely tied to him who were involved in this operation. There were pictures of some security officers who may have been part of his security detail from time to time, but this is normal. Security people who deal in security details rotate among different officials, both domestic and foreign. So having somebody in a picture does not imply that they're close at all. The Crown Prince has denied this. The Crown Prince is not aware of this. Even the senior leadership of our intelligence service was not aware of this. This was an operation that was a rogue operation.
That doesn't explain, however, why this man, Maher Mutrib, reportedly made 4 phone calls to bin Salman's personal secretary during the time that Khashoggi was being killed. And if, as Jubair says, the senior leadership of Saudi's intelligence service was unaware, why then has Ahmed al-Asiri, its deputy head, been fired by royal decree? Questions too as to why send an autopsy expert if the plan was...
Yes. There's a lot of questions about this. And of course what they did
It's a perfect crime.
It's a perfect crime. I wonder why the random guy that did it. Let's just go right to, because I'll put more context to this. Middle East policy is being shaped in no small degree by the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, who is very far to the right, and Mohammed bin Salman's mentor. There's a big Emirati dimension to where Saudi Arabia is going. And in fact, if we're real, that will mean no improvements in any type of regional or domestic rights writ broadly, but it will mean a much more progressive, socially open atmosphere, which would be better for most Saudi people. Undoubtedly, being in Abu Dhabi or Dubai is a much more pleasant experience if you're a citizen, not if you're an indentured servant. In either place, by the way. But Salman and then Jared Kushner, I mean, these are people, 2 of them are in their 30s. These are vicious trust fund babies remaking the Middle East, and there has been nothing in Mohammed bin Salman's life that would indicate that he couldn't get away with ordering something like this. This is Jared Kushner talking about it. He's speaking with Van Jones at the a Citizens Forum.
What kind of advice have you given MBS in this whole situation?
Just to be transparent, to be fully transparent. The world is watching. This is a very, very serious accusation and a very serious situation, and to make sure you're transparent and to take this very seriously.
Yeah. How do you respond to that? How did he respond to that, counsel?
We'll see. I mean, I know that the Secretary of State had some good meetings over there, and we'll see.
There is absolutely there's no reason to think that he did not see why he could not get away with this entirely. This guy has been praised and feted by everybody from Thomas Friedman to The Rock. And I have to say, I hope people can follow this. Things like getting rid of the ban on women drivers in Saudi Arabia is a very positive thing. And Saudi Arabia is still a country of gender apartheid. But part of the Western press coverage of this guy reflected a very narrow focus on certain hot-button liberal issues that we get focused on. We think a lot about what women are wearing or not wearing in Saudi Arabia. We think a lot about these driving issues. Now, they're important issues, but if you talk to the women who have been imprisoned, who are citizen activists, not only on driving, but on a whole slew of issues to actually become equal or significantly more equal citizens in a gender apartheid state, and they've been imprisoned because specifically when Mohammed bin Salman released the decree, the frame was, this is a gift from the prince. This is not a response to your pressure. This is a gift from the ruler. And when Norah O'Donnell and all of these people went over there, it's all, oh my God, did you hear what he said about the abayas and cars? And some of it was very unusual stuff to hear from a Saudi leader, there's no doubt. And making religious police not able to arrest people and letting women drive are big, significant social reforms. They're great. But they're in the package of a young, vicious dictator consolidating power over his family. And we're sitting here just going, you know, oh my God, they're not wearing those burqas we hate anymore. So there was this very narcissistic, narrow frame that we ignored people that are actually activists in Saudi Arabia who are being crushed by this guy. And he could play up to a global audience and consolidate his power on a couple of important but non-structural issues. And, you know, and it really took literally getting a hit squad to abduct a U.S. resident journalist and fucking cut his body apart while he was still alive for people to understand that maybe this kid isn't nice. And the reporting was there, okay? Like, this was not coming from nowhere in any way, shape, or form.
Trillburner, the discourse lover on Twitter who does the Age of Napoleon podcast, had a tweet I liked. It was something to the effect of, if there's not a lot of sort of values from the founding generation that you want to see revived, but a knee-jerk distaste for aristocracy and monarchy is definitely one of those.
No shit. That's a great... No, you actually do read the founders. They're pretty good on that. They're not impressed like our current aristocrats seem to be.
Yeah. There were certainly some good things about the Enlightenment values that brought us this nation and brought us from feudalism to capitalism, where we do have more freedom than people had under feudalism. It's just a question now of, we could probably have a lot more freedom. And our freedom's been rolled back since what we might call the golden age of capitalism.
Definitely. Sorry?
For some of us. Like, I mean...
Some of us,
right.
Like,
you got rid of the serfdoms and slaveries and stuff.
It was, I mean, it's funny. It was, Richard Wolff was saying, he's like, we're done. Like capitalism is over. We don't, and it could get much worse, but like we're done. And it was interesting. It was an interesting read.
It seems to be transitioning into some sort of neo-feudalist hierarchy.
Like a merge between Amazon and China.
Pretty horrifying.
Yeah. It is pretty horrifying. Chomsky, all this recent Saudi outrage is just tribalism on a slightly higher level. Where was the USA when Saudi was bombing Yemenite children? Yeah, we've pointed this out. Yep. And also, I mean, look, and just to add one other thing, anybody who uses this to undermine how disgusting what happened was is just morally sick. And Jamal Khashoggi, like, he doesn't need to be a hero or a pure being for this to be absolutely wrong. And in some ways, what the point of this is, what makes it so gangster in like a very literal sense of the word, is that he wasn't a dissident. He wasn't. He was a guy who wanted a more sensible, he supported those reforms, but he didn't want it in the context of a preening, vicious prince. And he had relationships and support with rival members of the Saudi monarchy. So he was nobody who was, he never talked about getting rid of the House of Saud, and he was close to the House of Saud. And that underlines even that much more how brazen this shit is.
Yeah, hence the widespread outrage, right? Because it's not like he's some sort of dissident. His relationship to power there was the relationship a lot of our journalists have to our power structures.
Right.